Hello everybody, in this video we're going to be seeing what if the Soviet Union joined the Allies in 1939. So yeah, let's just hop right in. Now, obviously we know that in our timeline there was the molotov-ribbontov pact, which Germany signed a few weeks, I believe, before invading Poland, which was a secret treaty basically just partitioning Eastern Europe and also a bunch of trade agreements. Basically like uh, a live and let live from the Soviets and the Germans. Um, and this time we're going to say that the opposite happens and that the Allies instead are able to get alliance with the Soviet Union. The Soviets had proposed an alliance with the French and British, um, but it broke down. The French and British, they didn't want to work with the communists. But in this timeline, we're gonna say that it worked out that the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact isn't signed, that Germany isn't able to get a deal with the communists. Now Germany, this is 1939. They're still gonna go and invade Poland. They may very well not invade Poland because they don't have the same assurance that the Soviets won't intervene and they'll have the Soviets on their side. Because Germany, they don't want to fight a two-front war. They're obviously a little worried about that. But again, this is the fascist. This is Mustache Man. So perhaps we can say that he still just goes along with it anyways, because why the heck not? Okay, they're just gonna try their invasion anyways. Okay, so just like our time, Germany is going to try their invasion of Poland, and the French and British are going to uh, use this as a time to declare war. So Germany, they still do Germany things, push, encircle Danzig, rush toward Warsaw. Eventually, yep, we all know what happened to Poland in our timeline. Didn't last long, only about a month. Um, but we're gonna see a change. And actually, hold on. Alright, for these World War II things, I'm actually gonna use these colors here. I'm gonna show the axis as gray. And so, unlike in our timeline where the Red Army was entering Poland obviously as a foe, this timeline we're gonna see the Soviets enter as a friend. Now they kind of tell Poland, hey, look, we're gonna save you. Your country's dying. You're gonna lose, but if you give up perhaps some of your eastern territories, let us move into here. Um, maybe we can do some things for you. So obviously the Poles are like at first like hell no, we're not giving up our land. But as Germany keeps pushing, and the writing is on the wall that the Soviets are going to move in either way, and the West isn't going to do anything about it, eventually the Poles are just like, sure, come on in and help us defend against the Wehrmacht. So Germans keep moving in. And the first Soviets arrive on the border. Now, obviously, this takes the Germans a little aback. They're like, "Whoa, Russia! You didn't say you were going to defend Poland." We kind of just, it was a little unclear. But it's kind of obvious now what the Soviets are doing, and the Germans, they are surprised. Now, could Russia stop the fall of Poland? No, no, it's not going to work. This is like the Winter War on steroids. The Germans, the Soviets, while they're more prepared than in our timeline's Barbarossa, um, yeah, they're still outnumbered. The Stalin's purges have just happened, so they're even more devastated from that. They didn't even get the Winter War to fix their army, so yeah, the Germans, they're just gonna just keep moving. The advance into Poland, they just flow that in. It's not obviously the same as our timeline. The planning's not there. They weren't really prepared for this, but they just, yeah, they can just keep moving. Eventually, the Germans decide that they're going to try to aim to reach this river. No, there's a big river. They're gonna try to push toward around the Dnieper here in the south, like this Dnieper line here. Basically just get as far as they can before the winter starts. So, Germany, they push down into Ukraine, and our push near Minsk, and sort of like our time, we see Germany envelop a Soviet army around Minsk, take the city, and just keep on pushing. We'd also likely see the Germans launch an invasion of the Baltic states, as these countries are very weak, and it would allow the Germans to sort of push through in the north, which is going to be important since they need to take as much land as possible for the Red Army actually gets ready for war, because the Soviets are a bit unprepared at the moment. And I'm also going to, by this point, color the Soviets in as red, because the Red Army has now been kicked out of Poland, so the Polish army is now mostly just integrated into the Red Army. So this is not, the Allies and the Soviets will basically be fighting a separate war, although the Allies will do what they can to lend lease them and whatnot. Just important to keep that in mind. So yeah, we'd see the Soviets launch their own army into the Baltics, and the Baltic states are like, whoa, 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 whoa. They don't want either army in. But they can't really do much. The Allies are not going to come and save them. And eventually we see something like this. Estonia is fully occupied by the Soviets, Lithuania by the Germans, and then Latvia sort of split down the middle. Although the Germans were able to get to Riga before the Soviets could establish a defensive line along the river, which is going to allow the Germans to continue to push up into Latvia. Germans continue to push up, now pushing up to Leningrad. And in this timeline, we also are going to see another big difference, which is Germany's sort of lack of allies in this. In 1939, it was basically just Germany and Slovakia. Finland has no reason to join because the Soviets never took their land. And Hungary and Romania, they're also not going to join in this initial invasion because they didn't join the invasion of Poland in our timeline, so why would they join this? So Germany is going to be a bit more alone, but they're still going to try to reach, at the very least, Leningrad. Did I see St. Petersburg? No, this is Leningrad. Push up. Eventually, they don't take Leningrad, but they do cut off some forces occupying Estonia. And eventually, they destroy all that, which is pretty decent losses for the Soviets. Back down here in Ukraine, the Germans, they're going to try to push further down into the Black Sea area. Eventually, they reach the outskirts of Odessa, and they also begin to push toward Kyiv. And much like our timeline, up the middle too, the Germans are going to push, although taking Moscow is a bit more of a pipe dream. So they just kind of realize we're going to focus on Leningrad and Ukraine for now and take Moscow maybe next year. Germany pushes up and up. Eventually, they do reach the sea like they hoped. And now Leningrad is officially cut off, although the siege is less intense than our timeline because, again, the Finnish army from the north isn't present, so the Soviets don't have nearly as much pressure here, only the German army from the south. Speaking of the south, Germany pushes down into the Ukraine, eventually enveloping Odessa, and this time they do take that eventually. And they continue to push over into Ukraine, but like I said, they're going to get stopped near the Dnieper River, where the Soviets do put up a successful defensive line. Oh yeah, they would also probably take Kyiv eventually, which is somewhere here. And yeah, so this is going to be the German gains as of the ends of 1939. Obviously, as winter sets in, these advances will slow, but overall, pretty decent from Germany overall. Good work by the Germans. The Soviets were not prepared for this. They certainly did not save the Poles, but obviously another big difference is Germany now has to man this whole front, while France and Britain are still sort of doing their own thing over here. Now, in this timeline, we're going to see Germany go for a little bit of a different strategy. Obviously, a Schlieffen plan by now would not work because their forces are split. Their tanks and army needs to be concentrated on the east. And so Germany is instead going to try to focus on a strategy of Russia first. So basically, in the last war, they tried to go for France first in World War One. Didn't work out so well, so now they're going to deem Russia as the real weakness. And sort of that has been proven right. They have been able to capture a lot of Soviet territory. And their hope is that maybe if they could just continue to Moscow and Stalingrad and Leningrad, they can maybe capitulate the Soviets and then maybe turn west. Also, I'm not going to map out the war in China. This is just stagnant here. But Asia is going to become important later. So, winter is going to begin to end, and in maybe around January to February 1940, we would see some action in the West, but this time Germany is going to try Operation Westenberg. And the point of this operation, our timeline, was obviously to secure the Scandinavian resources. And Germany is still going to try that. Now, the West is a bit caught off guard. They thought, oh, it's winter, the Germans are focused on the East. But no, they are going to try some operations here for funsies. Denmark surrenders immediately. But Norway, yeah, Germany still does the same thing. And they still push up and up into Norway, eventually cutting it off. The Allies try to make a stand near Narvik, in which they actually do decently because Germany has a bit less military here, because again, a lot of it is on the east. But overall, the operation for Germany is still a success, as Norway eventually falls under German occupation, allowing them to trade the iron ore with Sweden that they'll need. Although Narvik, unlike our timeline, Narvik was abandoned because the French and British want to focus on the battle for France. But since the battle for France isn't going to happen in this timeline, they just kind of stay here. And the Germans probably aren't going to be able to break this. So, yeah, this is just going to last, and this could become a weakness later. Potential foreshadowing. Anyways, 1940 has begun. Our timeline, 1940, was mostly the phony war until the Blitzkrieg. But in this timeline, it's certainly not a very phony war. 1940 is going to be a big year for the Germans. Now, similar to how in 1942, we saw Germany's big plan to push to Stalingrad. In this timeline, we're going to see a German operation to still get to this Caucasus oil down here. Yeah, and this is going to be done primarily by, obviously, Stalingrad is a bit farther away. So, Germany decided instead they're going to focus their attention on trying to seize Crimea, which is the main Soviet outpost in the south. But before that, though, we're going to discuss allies. Germany would have probably by this point gotten hungry on their team, we're going to say, joining the war. Romania is an interesting case. Obviously, there was the whole partition of Romania in our timeline. Eventually, them joining the Axis anyways. And we're still going to say, maybe this is a little unrealistic, but we're going to say that Germany reluctantly gets Romania to also hop in on the Soviet war, basically threatening, hey, we're going to let Hungary take your land, unless you help us, right? Help us against the Soviets. We're going to protect you, okay? And Romania's like, fine, we'll join your war. One nation Germany will not be able to get into the war is going to be Italy, however, as Italy sees what's going on. They see that, hey, we probably can't do much, and we're going to have to fight the West alone, which let's be honest, probably isn't going to go so well for Italy, and Italy is still building up for war. So Italy's going to just say, hey, Germany, we're just going to stick this one out. Obviously, they're going to be sympathetic to the Germans, but they're going to try to be more pragmatically neutral, we could say. However, as they're going to see, that doesn't mean that Italy is going to do nothing. They're going to do stuff, just not in this whole thing. Now, you may be wondering also during this whole time, oh, that would have fallen by now. What has the West been doing? What has the Allies been doing? And the short answer is pretty much nothing. They're still doing pretty much nothing. The French tried their little invasion of the Saarland, but just like in our timeline, they don't get too far with it. Um, and yeah, the Germans also would have massively improved their own defenses on this border as well. And so the French and British, they're just still building up, improving their army, and eventually just kind of letting the Germans and the Soviets grind each other down until they're prepping a major offensive, perhaps in the later years of the war. And also, obviously, the British blockade is still going on and still putting a somewhat of a ticking timer on Germany, although they're going to obviously try to fix that now with what they're about to do. So Germany begins the big 1940 operation by breaking through the Dnipro and cutting Crimea off. Germany pushes down into the Crimea with pretty decent success. The Soviets had some time over the winter to recover, but it wasn't enough. And eventually the Germans begin the battle for Sevastopol, which is going to be this timeline's Stalingrad. We'd also see a German push toward the Donbass, in which the Russians do put up a pretty strong defense, as the Germans are, like I said, mostly focused in the south. So yeah, that's also happening. Now, meanwhile, while this big offensive in Ukraine is going on, we see some other fascists making moves, including, as I mentioned, Italy. The Italians, which I'll color in green, begin to make their own moves, this time in Yugoslavia. I'm going to color this in pink to show this is a separate war. Yugoslavia is going to have a bit harder time of Greece. For starters, because the Bulgarians are helping the Italians here. And also because Italy has more time to prepare, they're more focused. And so, yeah, Italy, they do get pretty decent success, actually, into Yugoslavia. This isn't going to be a cakewalk for Italy, but like I said, they do better generally. They do a bit better. Eventually, Macedonia is cut off and occupied by the Bulgarians and the Italians, as they are able to link up down here in Macedonia. We'd also see the Hungarians occupy Vojvodina, which was this part of Serbia that they wanted. So maybe like something like this, I would say. Yeah. We also see Italy getting help from the Croatians, who do a little bit of funsies to Eustache. And eventually, Yugoslavia, we're not gonna, this would obviously take a little bit, but eventually the Yugoslavs do capitulate in a few months to the combined Italian, Bulgarian forces. So let's see what that looks like. So yeah, Bulgaria, they get their Greater Bulgaria lands, Macedonia and Nice. Italy expands their annexed land to Albania and Dalmatia. Ustaše, Croatia is formed as an Italian ally. And lastly, we would have Serbia. Now, to be clear, this is going to be very unstable for Italy to hold. Tito's communists, they're going to do crazy guerrilla warfare, sort of like in Libya. But for now, again, Italy technically has control over this part of the Balkans. Okay, now down here, back over for the Battle of Sevastopol, we would see Germany push around a little closer into the city, eventually occupying more of it. Although as they get closer to the core, we see heavier and heavier losses. But eventually we see Germany's actually take the city. They did what they couldn't do in Stalingrad, and they actually took the city. Surprisingly, this is a big bloodbath. But unfortunately for them, simultaneously as they were taking the city, we see the Soviets begin what we could only call as a counteroffensive. They push back into the Donbass, where the Germans are a lot weaker, and they actually do decently well. They push over, and they eventually risk Germany losing the Crimea again, which eventually forced them to retreat from this area. So even though most German forces were able to retreat, only around a few thousand are captured in Crimea. This also means that Germany doesn't actually gain that much ground from this. They didn't gain that much, except for maybe like bulking up certain positions in Ukraine. But otherwise, Germany sort of wasted their chance to defeat the Soviets. Now, this offensive for the Reds also huge losses, and I assume Germany is gonna make some gains on our parts of the front. But they this isn't the blow that they need to take out the Soviets fully. We also begin to see by this point of the war, by late 1940, the Western Allies, France and Britain, begin to sort of annoy the Germans more on the West. Not necessarily in terms of a ground invasion, the Germans' borders defended, but more so with air attacks on the Rhineland, slowing German industry, and in general, just, yeah, Germany is just having to watch this border more. Now, approaching the end of 1940 and into 1941, it's even more clear that in our timeline, Germany is cooked. They're not going to defeat the whole Soviet Union. The French and British are slowly grinding them down. Um, so that sucks for them. Why is this? I could have sworn I colored this in. Did I like undo or something? Anyways, so this is going to be sort of problematic for the Germans. So as 1941 begins, we're going to see Italy do their next move on Greece. Now, Greece, the British and French, they're going to put up a bit more of a stand for Greece, because obviously it's more important for the Mediterranean. And Italy actually agrees, hey, we're going to sit down with the British and the French, and we're going to negotiate sort of a minor partition of Greece. So let's see what that looks like. So yeah, so Italy, they maintain control of some Aegean islands over here. They expand their Albania, and Bulgaria gets all of Thrace, which is, so yeah, but Greece, for the most part, remains alive as a state. Oops, forgot to color in Cyprus. Doo-doo-doo. Yeah, but, and this is gonna mean that Italy, for now, they're gonna take a chill pill on the expansion. Like I said, they're not gonna go to war with the West, and they're still busy trying to consolidate their Balkan territories. So, for now, Italy just decides to chill. But, you know who isn't going to chill is Japan. Now, in Asia, things have mostly been going the same, actually. Things didn't really change. Um, the USA has actually still did the embargo, just a bit delayed because they didn't invade Indochina. But, yeah, Japan is still encroaching on China. And the West is also continuing to support China, especially because now they don't have Indochina. So Japan, they still decide sometime in 1941 that maybe we need to do some more radical options if we want to take over Asia. Over here in Germany, in the east, Germany decides for their 41 offensive that this is getting a bit desperate for them. So they decide their new offensive is like, you know what, we're just going to take Leningrad. Germany sends a bunch of panzer forces up here, and they just begin a brutal push toward the city, eventually taking the outskirts of it up into the Finnish area. More importantly, though, Germany is also going to try to cut off any sea route to Leningrad, which will involve them continuing to push further up into northern Russia. They eventually cut off the Soviet access to Karelia from this route, they can obviously still supply from here. And the Germans, they're going to push up into southern Karelia proper. And eventually, Leningrad is going to be even more cut off from the Soviet Union than they already were. However, just as the Germans are encroaching on the city, we see the French and British finally lock in. After years of not doing anything, they do something. Remember what I said about the Norway thing? Well, landings take place around Narvik. This is Narvik. I hope Narvik isn't up here somewhere. That would be embarrassing. Anyways, French and British, they do landings all over Norway. Very undermanned by Germany. The British and French is a bit of a risky operation, but they have big naval supremacy, and yeah, the Germans are overall weaker than in our timeline, so this makes this invasion more feasible. Eventually, most of northern Norway is liberated as the Allies begin to push the Germans out of southern Norway. Over here near Leningrad, the Germans continue their push up even more north, eventually taking the whole northern area around Leningrad, although the core of the city is still here. Meanwhile, Germany pushes even further up. At least they attempt to, but the Soviets do put sort of an end to this, as the Red Army begins a counteroffensive, as German attention is obviously focused on Norway as well. The Soviets push back, charging back to the sea, eventually threatening German forces again. Although, unlike the operation toward Crimea, the Germans, they don't get as lucky, and they actually lose a bunch of forces up here, which is a real shame. So, big loss here. However, also like the Crimea operation, Germany succeeds in taking Leningrad, surprisingly enough. So that's something, even though they lost a bunch of soldiers. Although this won't really devastate the Soviets that much, Leningrad was already basically out of the Red Army's area. So even though the Germans have freed up some forces, it's not going to make that big of a difference. Obviously, in Norway, the Allies continue to push. Eventually, they reach toward Oslo, as this just becomes impossible for the Germans to supply, and Norway is eventually completely liberated. It's approaching the end of 41. The Eastern Front would actually probably mostly stagnate again, but Germany just slowly getting squeezed to death. The resources are running low. But before the end of the year, we're going to see Japan do a little bit of a funny down here with the same Pearl Harbor operation destroying the U.S. Navy temporarily, and as they declare war, obviously, on America, and on the Netherlands, too. America is obviously going to fully join the war, and Germany and Hitler declares war on the United States to help out Japan, which is really going to put the nail in the coffin for Germany. But the Netherlands is a bit of an interesting case. They don't really want war with Germany, and Germany doesn't really want war with them, so they just kind of decide that, hey, Netherlands, focus on defending Indonesia, and we'll just focus on our own thing. And the Allies, they're not going to force the Dutch to join. They can't force them, even though they really want them to join. All these Benelux guys. So the Netherlands just decide, hey, we're going to stick this one out. Now, the Japanese blitzkrieg of our timeline still happens. Push down into Indochina, a bit into India, although it's not nearly as powerful. That's simply because number one, the Allies can focus here a little more, get more soldiers freed up. France still alive, they're just generally stronger. And number two, again, they don't also have Indochina, which was a big launching point for all this. So while they do take some of these islands, they would take the Philippines probably, at least some of the bigger Indonesian islands. They are stopped a bit earlier, eventually somewhere around here, I'd say, around like the smaller Indonesian islands near Oceania. Yeah, the war also in Europe, we're going to see is going to end significantly earlier. It's 1942 now, and it's basically, yeah, this is not good for Germany. The Soviets are pushing even harder on the east now. Eventually, they're going to liberate Leningrad very soon. The Germans, they try a defensive here, but it's yeah, it's not gonna go well. It's just delaying the inevitable. Over here in the west, most importantly, now with America in the war, we would see the first sort of probing operations into the German border. This is defended to the teeth, but remember, the Germans are also very outnumbered in this area. So we'd see a bit of pushing into the Saarland. Not a complete breakthrough just yet, but very, very close. And so Germany, they decide, we could go out like this. We could just slowly lose and like hold out for another 2 years. But that's not in their spirit. So they instead they're like, why the hell not? Let's just send all of the tanks over and let's just try an invasion of Belgium. Because why the fuck not? Belgium is also probably the Netherlands too, we're gonna say. And they basically just try a blitzkrieg. They're like, why the heck not? Belgium, Luxembourg, Netherlands, they're all surprised. But thanks to Allied intelligence, they knew this was coming, so they had at least a few weeks to prepare. Probably wouldn't be enough, but or maybe it would. But the Allies, they're gonna send their forces up into Belgium. Germany, they pushed decently well into the Netherlands, cutting it in half and reaching the big cities in the west of the country. Meanwhile, down here, they're going to try their little blitzkrieg operation that they did in our timeline, which would be pushing through the Ardennes and breaking through. Now, unlike the blitzkrieg operation of our timeline, the Allies, a bit more prepared with America here, less Germans, this is going to horribly backfire. The Germans get encircled in France, most of their panzers, as the French just take them all, and the British. And this is just the beginning of the end. Over here on the Eastern Front, we see the Soviets envelop the German-controlled Leningrad. This siege doesn't last that long, though. Germany just loses as they begin to push into the Baltic states. Down here in the south, momentum's a little bit slower, but they fully push the Germans out of the areas of Ukraine that are on the other side of the Dnipro. And yeah, they just push them to Belarus, and eventually Germany just pulls back a little bit for more defensive lines, we could say. Although no line is really defensive anymore for Germany. Defendable, I guess. We'll also probably see, by this point, Bulgaria, with Italian approval, just take, perhaps move in, we could say, to this part of Romania at some point. The Germans know that a war with Italy wouldn't help them at all. It would only make things worse, so they just told Romania to take it. And they do take it. Romania does take it. In fact, not only do they take it, but they actually decide that, hey, we're going to switch sides. Wait, that wasn't part of the plan, Germany says. Romania says, we don't care. We were hesitant to join your war, and it's obviously not going to go well for us. So Germany tries to reoccupy them. They take Transylvania, but the Soviets use this as an opportunity, and they connect with the Romanians and install, obviously, a communist government here. Meanwhile, in the west, Germany outnumbered France even stronger. Remember, France has never been occupied. The full French army is here. They're going to push up. They're going to eventually just reach the Rhine River. As, yeah, it's not looking good. Over here in Asia, actually nothing happens. Japan still loses the Battle of Midway. And, overall, the U.S. basically just holds Japan at the territories they already occupy. so Asia really is not that much of a threat. Commies continue to push up and around as they eventually get the Germans completely out of their original territory, as now they only have to push them into Poland and the Baltics, and obviously the Balkans. It is by this point that the Western allies, as the Soviets begin to liberate the Baltic governments and Poland, that they're like, hey, Stalin, so you're gonna like let these nations go after, you're gonna take your land that you were promised, and but otherwise you're gonna let them go, right? And Stalin's like, no, we're gonna establish a sphere of influence. As the race toward Berlin actually begins, Hungary gets invaded from the south, pushed toward Budapest as the battle for that begins. Eventually, we see a Soviet push into Galicia from the south, as well as a push near eastern Prussia. The Allies break out of the Rhineland, begin to push over to Berlin eventually, as just the charge throughout Germany begins. We all know what happened in 1941. Not 1945. Although this time just happened like 2 years earlier. Red Army pushes through, eventually getting to East Prussia and most of Poland. And the race is closer, but the Eisenhower, they still decide to halt, and they're just like, sure, let the Soviets have Berlin, because what the heck is the point? We don't want more Americans to die, because Germany's cooked anyways. So eventually, battle for Berlin. Soviets take Berlin, and the war basically just ends. The Axis gives up. But before that, we obviously also have to conclude the war in the East. Soviets are also going to do the invasion of Manchuria, like in our timeline. There are no atom bombs. So Japan may not surrender, we're going to say, just to make this interesting. So the U.S., they're going to have to liberate the Philippines, island hop in Japan, and actually invade the home islands. This may take years, but yeah, they're going to have to do it. Soviets, meanwhile, they occupy all of Korea, all of Manchuria, and China also liberates most of their stuff. So yeah, that really just leaves this part, the home islands, to be invaded. The U.S. Does their whole plan. They invade from the southern island, and then they invade over here in Tokyo. While the Soviets do their also northern plan, invading Japan from the north. There isn't really much to map out here. Eventually, the USA would capitulate Japan with the help of the Soviet Union. Japan, it's going to be a brutal fight, but this is not going to last. And by, say, still around 1945, just because of how long this invasion would take, Japan surrenders, and to the Americans too, because they're obviously scared of the communists fully taking over. So yeah, still around 1945, the Japanese still just surrender, as now we can actually see what this peace deal is going to look like. So let us just see that. Okay, so this is my post-war map. Now as you can see, it looks kind of similar to our timeline, although there is some pretty big differences, as we're going to go over. So let us just begin, starting in Europe. First, obviously, the biggest is going to be this new Mediterranean axis. Mussolini is still in charge in Italy. Bulgaria is still controlled by a king. Yugoslavia collapsed. Greece, tiny. So yeah, we're gonna have a third player in the Cold War. Meanwhile, up north, Hungary, Romania, Poland are communists. But unlike in our timeline, the Czechs and Austrians remain fully in the Western sphere, and this is because the West is like, hey, so you want to protect Poland? Why didn't you give up Poland? Why don't you give Poland back to the pre-war government? And the Soviets are like, nuh-uh. And the West is like, all right, fine, we're gonna take Czechia and Austria. So we have a communist Slovakia and a democratic capitalist Czechia. Over here in Germany, the occupation zones are still mostly the same. They agree on that. Um, Although, unlike our time, the French actually succeed in their goal of taking the Saarland. This didn't happen in our timeline because America and I think Britain opposed it. And obviously, the EU being founded, the French would get access to the coal of this region. But this timeline, with France being more independent, we could say, more since they were never occupied, they decide, nope, we're gonna take it, and you guys can go suck an egg, America and Britain. So that's something. Over here in Asia, we see Korea remain fully under the communist control, because again, the Soviets were able to occupy all of Korea, and Japan is split between most of it goes to the Americans in the south, but we see a smaller northern communist Japan. So instead of a North and South Korea, we have a North and South Japan. Also, the Chinese Civil War is mostly the same. The Soviets give Manchuria to the communists, and with this, we probably see eventually the socialists win in China. All of that is a story for another day. And so the continuation of this world is gonna be a bit interesting. Obviously, one big difference is that fascism is still around. We have this big Mediterranean axis down here of Italy, Spain, and Bulgaria, which is going to be a major third player in this Cold War. But another big difference is that France and Britain, they're not strong. I mean, they've obviously, this war hurt them a lot. But Europe as a whole is not as devastated. They've been at war for 2 less years. Um, France is never occupied. Britain is never bombed as much. Um, the Soviet Union, even, they lost less men, even though they have to face most of the fighting. Um, which is gonna be, why do you? I just this island has been annoying me all this whole video. Just get out of here. Okay. Um, Soviets, even they face less losses. Although Leningrad was occupied for a short bit, so that's a little upsetting. Um, Obviously, also the West is stronger in Europe, although a bit less united. Um, and the Soviets are stronger in Asia with all of Korea and northern Japan. So, how does this world continue? You guys can discuss that in the comments. What you think? Maybe I can even do. Yeah, this would be a cool continuation, but we'll see.